Before we begin, a word. Every voice you are about to hear could belong to a real person, and the next one could be yours. Claim a part and read it aloud at footnotesandfolly. Click. Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly, and to Josephus' Antiquities. I am Pemberton. This is Book 15, Part 2. The Roman world is tearing itself apart. Antony against Octavian, and little Judea is caught in the wash of it. Cleopatra, unable to swallow Herod's kingdom whole, contrives instead to set him fighting her other neighbors, the Arabs, hoping both sides will be weakened. In the middle of that war comes a catastrophe straight out of the ground, a colossal earthquake that kills, Josephus tells us, 30,000 people and flattens the country, and the Arabs, thinking Judea finished, murder Herod's ambassadors and take the field. We will hear the remarkable speech with which Herod rallies his shaken men, and watch him win a crushing victory. And then the news arrives that changes everything. Antony is beaten at Actium, and Herod's patron is finished. Before he dares face the victor, Herod coldly removes the one man whose claim to the throne outranks his own, the aged Hyrcanus, once high priest, now put to death on a charge of treason. Then, with nothing in his hands but his nerve, he sails to Octavian at Rhodes. Let us take up the story.
After this, Herod kept himself ready to march against the king of Arabia. He did this because the king had been ungrateful to him, and because, after everything that had happened, he still would not deal justly with him. Herod had delayed his own cause because of the Roman war, for the battle at Actium was now expected in the 187th Olympiad, where Cæsar and Antony were to fight for supreme power over the world. Herod had long possessed a very fruitful country. From it he had received large revenues, and with that money he had raised strong armies. He gathered a body of men, supplied them carefully with everything they needed, and intended them to serve as auxiliaries for Antony. But Antony said he had no need of Herod's help. Instead, he ordered him to punish the king of Arabia. Antony had heard from both Herod and Cleopatra how treacherous that king had been. This was exactly what Cleopatra wanted, because she thought it would benefit her if the two kings harmed one another as much as possible. When Herod received this message from Antony, he returned, but kept his army with him so that he could immediately invade Arabia. When his cavalry and infantry were ready, he marched to Diospolis. The Arabians also came there to meet him, for they knew that this war was coming against them. A great battle was fought, and the Jews won the victory. Afterward, however, another large Arabian army gathered at Cana, a place in Cilicia. Herod learned of this in advance, so he marched against them with the greater part of his forces. When he came near Cana, he decided to set up camp and build a rampart, so that he could wait for the right time to attack the enemy. While he was giving these orders, the Jewish multitude cried out that he should not delay, but should lead them at once against the Arabians. They were eager because they believed they were in very good order. Those who had fought in the earlier battle were especially confident, since they had won and had not even allowed their enemies to come to close combat. Seeing their excitement and readiness, the king decided to use the zeal the multitude was showing. After assuring them that he would not fall behind them in courage, he led them forward. He stood before them in full armor, and all the regiments followed him in their proper ranks. At this, fear fell upon the Arabians. When they saw that the Jews could not easily be defeated and were full of spirit, most of them ran away and avoided battle. They would have been completely destroyed if Antony had not fallen upon the Jews and thrown them into distress. This Antony was Cleopatra's general over the soldiers she had there. He was hostile to Herod, and had watched the battle closely to see how it would end. He had decided that if the Arabians did anything brave and successful, he would stay still, but if they were beaten, as in fact happened, he would attack the Jews with his own forces and with the troops the country had gathered for him. So Antony attacked the Jews unexpectedly, when they were tired and thought they had already defeated the enemy, and he slaughtered many of them. The Jews had spent their courage against the enemy they knew, and were ready to rest after their victory, so they were easily beaten by these fresh attackers. They suffered especially heavy losses in places where horses were useless, on rough and stony ground where the attackers knew the terrain better than they did. After the Jews had suffered this blow, the Arabians recovered their courage from their defeat, returned to the fight, and killed those who were already fleeing. Slaughter took place everywhere, and only a few of those who escaped returned to the camp. When King Herod saw that the battle was lost, he rode up to bring them help. He worked hard to assist them, but he did not arrive in time to do any good. The Jewish camp was taken. Thus the Arabians unexpectedly gained a very glorious success, winning a victory they would never have won by themselves and killing a large part of the enemy's army. After this, Herod could only act like a private raider. He made attacks on many parts of Arabia and troubled them with sudden incursions, while he camped among the mountains and avoided every opportunity for a pitched battle. Even so, by his persistence, and the hard labor he took in the matter, he greatly harassed the enemy. He also took great care of his own forces, and used every means he could to restore his affairs to their former condition. At this time the battle at Actium took place between Octavius Cæsar and Antony, in the 7th year of Herod's reign. At the same time there was an earthquake in Judea unlike any that had happened before, and it caused great destruction among the cattle of that country. About 10,000 men also died when houses fell. But the army, which was lodged out in the field, suffered no harm from this disaster. When the Arabians heard about the earthquake, enemies of the Jews who enjoyed making the reports worse told them the news in exaggerated form. The Arabians took heart as though their enemy's country had been completely overthrown, its men utterly destroyed, and nothing now remained that could oppose them. Therefore, when Jewish ambassadors came to them after these events to seek peace, they seized them and killed them. Then they advanced eagerly against the Jewish army. The Jews did not dare withstand them. They were so crushed by their calamities that they neglected their affairs and gave themselves up to despair. They had no hope of meeting the Arabians on equal terms in battle, and no hope of obtaining help from anywhere else, since affairs at home were also in such great distress. When matters stood like this, the king spoke to the commanders and tried to lift their spirits, which had completely sunk. First he tried to encourage and embolden some of the better sort. Then he ventured to address the multitude, something he had previously avoided for fear that, because of the misfortunes that had happened, they would react badly. So he made a speech to the multitude to console them. My fellow soldiers, you know that not long ago we suffered many disasters that interrupted what we were doing. It is likely that even men famous for courage can hardly keep their spirits up under such conditions. But since we cannot avoid battle, and since nothing that has happened is beyond our power to set right by one brave and well-executed action, I have decided both to encourage you and to explain the situation. Both parts of what I say are meant to keep you firm in the courage that belongs to you. First, I will show that this war is just on our side, and therefore necessary, because it has been caused by the wrongdoing of our enemies. Once you are convinced of this, it will give you real eagerness. After that I will show that our present misfortunes are not very serious, and that we have the strongest reason to hope for victory. I will begin with the first point, and I appeal to you as witnesses of what I say. You certainly know the wickedness of the Arabians. It is so great that it seems unbelievable to other people, and it includes the worst barbarity and ignorance of God. The main insults they have committed against us have come from greed and envy. They have attacked us treacherously and suddenly. Why should I list many examples of their conduct? When they were in danger of losing their own government and becoming slaves to Cleopatra, who freed them from that fear. It was my friendship with Antony, and his kind feeling toward us, that kept even these Arabians from being utterly ruined, because Antony was unwilling to do anything that we might suspect as unfriendly. But when he intended to give Cleopatra some parts of both our territories, I managed even that matter so that, by giving him gifts of my own, I secured both nations. I undertook the payment myself, gave him 200 talents, and became guarantor for the 200 more imposed on the land subject to that tribute. Yet they have cheated us of this, though it was not reasonable that Jews should pay tribute to any living man, or allow any part of their land to be taxed. But even if that had to be, we should not have to pay tribute on behalf of these Arabians, whom we ourselves preserve. Nor is it proper that men who have declared, with great sincerity and awareness of our kindness, that they keep their principality through us, should injure us and deprive us of what is due to us, while we have remained not their enemies but their friends. Keeping covenants matters even among the bitterest enemies, and among friends it is absolutely necessary. Yet these men do not observe it. They think profit is the greatest good, no matter how it is gained, and they think injustice is no evil, if they can make money by it. Is there any question, then, whether the unjust should be punished, when God himself has declared that they should, and has commanded us always to hate injuries and injustice? This is not only just, but necessary in wars between nations. These Arabians have done what both Greeks and barbarians acknowledge as the grossest wickedness. They beheaded our ambassadors, though the Greeks declare ambassadors to be sacred and inviolable. As for us, we have learned the best of our doctrines and the holiest part of our law from God through angels, or ambassadors. That very name brings God to human knowledge, and is enough to reconcile enemies with one another. What wickedness, then, can be greater than killing ambassadors who come to negotiate about doing what is right? After such actions, how can they possibly live securely in ordinary life, or succeed in war? In my judgment, they cannot. Perhaps some will say that holiness and righteousness are indeed on our side, but that the Arabians are braver or more numerous than we are. First, it is not proper for us to say this, because wherever righteousness is, God himself is there, and where God is, there are both numbers and courage. But let us also examine our own circumstances. We were victors in the first battle. When we fought again, they could not withstand us, but ran away and could not endure our attacks or our courage. After we had conquered them, Athenian came and made war on us without declaring it. Tell me, is that proof of their manhood? Is it not rather a second proof of their wickedness and treachery? Why, then, should we lose courage over something that ought to give us stronger hope? Why should we be afraid of men who are always beaten when they fight openly, and who, when they seem to conquer, win only by wickedness? And even if anyone thinks they are truly courageous, should that not stir him to do his utmost against them? True valor is not shown by fighting weak people, but by overcoming the hardiest opponents. But if anyone has been frightened by our distress, and by the misery caused by the earthquake, let him first consider that this very event will deceive the Arabians, because they suppose what has happened to us is greater than it really is. Besides, the same thing that makes them bold should not discourage us. You see that these men do not gain their eagerness from any advantage or virtue of their own, but from their hope that we have been utterly broken by our misfortunes. When we march boldly against them, we will quickly pull down their arrogant opinion of themselves. By attacking them, we will gain this advantage: they will not be so insolent when we come to battle. Our troubles are not so great, nor is what happened a sign of God's anger against us, as some imagine. Such things are accidents, misfortunes that occur in the ordinary course of events. And if we allow that this happened by God's will, then we must also allow that it is now ended by his will, and that he is satisfied with what has already happened. If he had wanted to afflict us further by it, he would not have changed his purpose so soon. As for the war we are engaged in, he himself has shown that he wills it to continue and knows it to be just. While some people in the countryside have perished, all of you who were under arms have suffered nothing, but have all been preserved alive. By this God makes it plain to us that if all of you with your children and wives had been in the army, you would not have suffered anything that could have greatly harmed you. Consider these things, and above all remember that you always have God as your protector. Pursue these men with just bravery, unjust in friendship, treacherous in battle, impious toward ambassadors, and always inferior to you in valor. When the Jews heard this speech, their spirits rose greatly, and they became more ready to fight than before. So Herod offered the sacrifices appointed by the law, then quickly took the army and led them against the Arabians. To do this he crossed the Jordan and camped near the enemy. He also decided to seize a certain castle that stood between the two armies, hoping it would help him and bring on a battle sooner. If delay became necessary, the place would strengthen his camp. Since the Arabians had the same design on the place, a struggle began over it. At first there were only skirmishes, then more soldiers came up, and it turned into a kind of battle. Men fell on both sides until the Arabians were defeated and withdrew. This at once gave the Jews no small encouragement. When Herod saw that the enemy army was willing to do anything rather than come to a pitched battle, he boldly attempted to reach the fortification itself, pull it down, and move closer to their camp so he could fight them. When the Arabians were forced out of their trenches, they came out in disorder, without the least eagerness or hope of victory. Still, they fought hand to hand, because they outnumbered the Jews and because their position in the war forced them to come on boldly. A terrible battle followed, and many fell on each side. At last, however, the Arabians fled. So great a slaughter followed their rout that they were not only killed by their enemies, but also became the cause of their own deaths. They were trampled by the crowd and by the heavy rush of people in disorder, and they were destroyed by their own armor. 5,000 men lay dead on the spot. The rest of the multitude soon ran inside the fortification for safety, but they had no solid hope of surviving because they lacked necessary supplies, especially water. The Jews pursued them but could not enter with them, so they surrounded the fortification, watched to prevent any help from getting in, and stopped anyone inside who tried to escape. When the Arabians found themselves in this condition, they sent ambassadors to Herod, first to propose terms of agreement, and afterward, because thirst pressed them so hard, to offer to submit to whatever he wished if he would free them from their present distress. But he would not receive ambassadors, accept a ransom, or agree to any moderate terms at all, because he was very eager to avenge the unjust actions they had committed against his nation. So they were compelled by other needs, and especially by thirst, to come out and surrender themselves to him as captives. In 5 days, 4,000 were taken prisoner. All the rest resolved to make a sally against their enemies and fight the matter out, choosing, if it had to be so, to die in battle rather than perish slowly and without honor. After they made this decision, they came out of their trenches, but they could not sustain the fight in any way. They were too weakened in both mind and body, had no room to make use of themselves, and considered it an advantage to be killed and a misery to survive. At the first attack, about 7,000 of them fell. After that blow, all the courage they had put on before disappeared, and they stood astonished at Herod's warlike spirit even under his own calamities. From then on they yielded and made him ruler of their nation. Herod was greatly lifted up by such a timely success, and returned home with much greater authority because of the bold and glorious expedition he had carried out. Herod's other affairs were now going very well, and he was not easy to attack from any direction. Yet a danger arose that threatened his whole kingdom after Antony was defeated by Cæsar at the Battle of Actium. At that time both Herod's enemies and his friends thought his situation was hopeless, because it seemed unlikely that a man who had shown such strong friendship for Antony would escape punishment. His friends lost hope that he would survive the crisis. His enemies openly pretended to be distressed for him, but privately they were delighted, because they hoped the change would improve their own position. Herod himself saw that no one of royal rank remained except Hyrcanus. He therefore thought it would be to his advantage not to let Hyrcanus remain as an obstacle. If Herod survived and escaped the danger he faced, he thought it safest to prevent a man who had a better claim to the kingdom than he did from making any move against him in such unsettled circumstances. And if Cæsar killed Herod, jealousy made him wish to kill the man who would otherwise become king after him. While Herod was thinking about this, an opportunity came to him. Hyrcanus had a very mild nature, both then and at other times. He did not want to take part in public affairs or involve himself in political changes, but left everything to fortune, and was content with whatever it gave him. Alexandra, his daughter, loved conflict and strongly desired a change in the government. She urged her father not to endure Herod's abusive treatment of their family forever, but to act in view of the hopes they could reasonably have for the future. She wanted him to write about these matters to Malchus, who was then governor of Arabia, and ask Malchus to receive them and protect them from Herod. If they went away, and Herod's affairs turned out as seemed likely because of Caesar's hostility toward him, then they would be the only people able to take over the government, both because they belonged to the royal family and because the people were well disposed toward them. Hyrcanus at first put off her request, but she showed herself to be a woman, and a contentious woman too, and would not stop either night or day. She kept speaking to him about these matters, and about Herod's treacherous designs, until at last she persuaded him to trust one of his friends, Josephus, with a letter declaring his decision. In it he asked the Arabian governor to send horsemen to receive him and escort him to the lake Asultites, which is 300 furlongs from the borders of Jerusalem. Hyrcanus trusted Josephus with the letter because Josephus had carefully attended both him and Alexandra, and also had serious reasons to hate Herod. He was related to Joseph, whom Herod had killed, and he was the brother of those who had earlier been killed at Tyre by Antony. Yet these motives could not make Josephus serve Hyrcanus in this matter. He preferred the hopes he had from the present king to the hopes he had from Hyrcanus, and gave the letter to Herod. Herod accepted his service favorably and told him to continue serving him by doing even more. He was to roll up the letter, seal it again, deliver it to Malchus, and then bring back Malchus's reply. It would be much better, Herod said, if he could also learn Malchus's intentions. Josephus was very ready to serve him in this too. The Arabian governor replied that he would receive Hyrcanus and all who came with him, including all the Jews who belonged to his party. He would also send enough troops to keep them safe on the journey, and Hyrcanus would lack nothing he desired. As soon as Herod received this letter, he immediately sent for Hyrcanus and questioned him about the alliance he had made with Malchus. When Hyrcanus denied it, Herod showed his letter to the Sanhedrim and had him put to death at once. This is the account as it appears in the commentaries of King Herod. Other historians, however, do not agree with it. They suppose that Herod did not find this occasion to kill Hyrcanus, but created it by treacherously laying a trap for him. They write that Herod and Hyrcanus were once at a feast, and that Herod, while giving no reason for Hyrcanus to suspect he was displeased with him, asked whether he had received any letters from Malchus. Hyrcanus answered that he had received letters, but only letters of greeting. Herod then asked whether he had received any gifts from him. Hyrcanus replied that he had received only 4 riding horses, which Malchus had sent him. These historians say Herod treated this as evidence of bribery and treason, and ordered Hyrcanus to be led away and killed. To show that Hyrcanus was guilty of no offense when he was brought to this end, they point to his mild character. Even in his youth he had never shown boldness or rashness, and the same was true when he became king. Even then he committed the management of most public affairs to Antipater. He was now more than 80 years old, and knew that Herod's government was secure. He had also come across the Euphrates and left behind the people beyond that river, who greatly honored him, though by doing so he placed himself entirely under Herod's power. It was therefore very hard to believe, and not at all consistent with his character, that he would attempt any revolution. Rather, they say, this was a plot devised by Herod. Such was the fate of Hyrcanus, and so he ended his life after enduring many varied turns of fortune. He was made high priest of the Jewish nation at the beginning of the reign of his mother Alexandra, who ruled for 9 years. After his mother's death, he took the kingdom himself and held it for 3 months, but lost it through his brother Aristobulus. He was then restored by Pompey, received every kind of honor from him, and enjoyed those honors for 40 years. But after Antigonus deprived him again, and mutilated his body, he was taken prisoner by the Parthians. After some time he returned home because of the hopes Herod had given him, but none of those hopes came to pass as he expected. Instead, he continued to struggle with many misfortunes throughout his life, and worst of all, as already related, he came to an end he did not deserve. His character seems to have been mild and moderate, and he generally allowed others under him to administer affairs. He disliked heavy involvement in public matters, and did not have enough shrewdness to govern a kingdom. Both Antipater and Herod rose to greatness because of his mildness, and in the end he received from them a death that accorded with neither justice nor piety. As soon as Herod had removed Hyrcanus, he hurried to Cæsar. Since he could not hope for kindness from Cæsar because of his friendship with Antony, he became suspicious of Alexandra. He feared she might seize the opportunity to bring the people into revolt and stir up disorder in the kingdom. So he entrusted everything to his brother Pheroras, placed his mother Cypros, his sister Salome, and the whole family at Masada, and instructed Pheroras that if he heard any bad news about him, he should take charge of the government. As for his wife Mariamne, because of the hostility between her and his sister's mother, which made it impossible for them to live together, he placed her at Alexandrium with her mother Alexandra. He left his treasurer Joseph and Sohemus of Icaria to take care of that fortress. These 2 had been very faithful to him from the beginning, and were now left as guards over the women. They were also ordered that if they heard any harm had happened to him, they were to kill both women, and as far as they could, preserve the kingdom for his sons, and for his brother Pheroras. After giving these orders, Herod hurried to Rhodes to meet Cæsar. When he sailed to that city, he took off his diadem, but gave up nothing else of his usual dignity. When he met Cæsar, he asked to be allowed to speak, and in doing so showed a far nobler example of greatness of spirit. He did not resort to begging, as people usually do in such circumstances, nor did he offer a petition as though he were a criminal. Instead, he boldly gave an account of what he had done. He said that he had been the greatest friend to Antony, and had done everything he could to help him gain power. He had not, indeed, been with Antony's army, because the Arabians had diverted him, but he had sent Antony both money and grain, which was still far less than he should have done for him. If a man admits that he is another man's friend, and knows him to be his benefactor, he is bound to risk everything for him, every power of his mind, every part of his body, and all the wealth he has. In this I admit that I fell short. Still, my conscience tells me that I did right in this much. I did not desert him after his defeat at Actium, and when his fortune clearly changed, I did not transfer my hopes from him to someone else. I remained with Antony, if not as a valuable fellow soldier, then certainly as a faithful counselor, when I showed him that his only way to save himself and not lose all his authority was to kill Cleopatra. Once she was dead, he would have room to keep his authority, and to bring you to make an agreement with him, rather than remain in hostility any longer. But he would listen to none of this advice. He preferred his own rash decision, which turned out badly for him, but profitably for you. Now, therefore, if you judge me and my eagerness in serving Antony according to your anger at him, I admit there is no room for me to deny what I have done. Nor will I be ashamed to admit publicly, too, that I had great affection for him. But if you set Antony aside and examine only how I behave toward my benefactors in general, and what kind of friend I am, you will find by experience that I will do the same and be the same toward you. Only the names are changed, and the firmness of the friendship I will bear toward you will not be something you disapprove. By this speech, and by his behavior, which showed Cæsar the openness of his mind, Herod greatly won him over. Cæsar himself had a generous and magnificent nature, so that the very actions that formed the basis of the accusation against Herod gained Cæsar's goodwill. Accordingly, Cæsar restored his diadem, and encouraged him to show himself as great a friend to him as he had been to Antony. Cæsar then held him in high esteem. He also added that Quintus Didius had written to him that Herod had very readily assisted him in the affair of the gladiators. After receiving such a kind welcome, Herod gained, beyond all his hopes, a crown more completely and firmly secured than ever by Cæsar's gift, as well as by a decree of the Romans that Cæsar arranged for his greater security. Herod then escorted Cæsar on his way to Egypt, gave gifts beyond his means both to Cæsar and to Cæsar's friends, and generally behaved with great magnanimity. He also asked Cæsar not to put to death a certain Alexander, who had been a companion of Antony. But Cæsar had sworn to kill him, so Herod could not obtain his request. Herod now returned to Judea with greater honor and confidence than ever, frightening those who had expected the opposite, since by God's favor he continued to gain greater splendor from his very dangers. He therefore prepared to receive Cæsar as he came out of Syria to invade Egypt. When Cæsar arrived, Herod entertained him at Ptolemais with every royal magnificence. He also gave gifts to the army and supplied them with abundant provisions. He proved to be one of Cæsar's warmest friends, put the army in formation, and rode along with Cæsar. He had 150 men, fully equipped in every respect in a rich and splendid manner, to give Cæsar and his friends a better reception. He also supplied them with what they needed as they crossed the dry desert, so that they lacked neither wine nor water, the latter being what the soldiers needed most. In addition, he presented Cæsar with 800 talents and gained the goodwill of them all, because he helped them in a far greater and more splendid degree than the kingdom he had received could afford. By this he showed Cæsar more and more the firmness of his friendship and his readiness to assist him. What helped him most was that his generosity came at the right time. And when they returned from Egypt, his assistance was in no way inferior to the good services he had already done for them.
And we will halt there, with Herod's boldest wager when he laid his crown at Octavian's feet, spoke to him honestly as one loyal friend of the fallen Antony, and walked away confirmed as Cain, and greater than before. The old Hasmonean line is now all but swept from the board. But the price of this endless surviving is being paid at home, in blood, by the people he loves most. Next time, in part 3, the darkest passage of the whole history, the poisoned jealousy of his court, and the trial and execution of his beloved Queen Mariamne, and after her the ruin of her mother Alexandra and his own brother-in-law Costobarus. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly. One last thing before you go. There's a part on our stage still wanting a voice, and it may as well be yours. Come and read for us at footnotesandfolly.click and be in the next telling rather than only watching it. And before the lamp goes out, a small request. If something tonight taught you, or surprised you, or simply delighted you, do leave a comment and tell me what it was. And if there's a work, an author, or a tale you should like me to take up next, set it down there as well. I read every one, and many an episode has begun its life as a viewer's suggestion. Until next time.